Hi everyone and welcome to my little show. Now today I'm going to have a conversation with you about fear. Now there's a reason why I'm having this specific conversation and a bit of self-disclosure here I guess. The main reason is that I have an hour to spend before my next client, so I thought I'd just have a chat to you. And also I made a deal with a client today that while we were discussing fear and where fear sits in his life, I came to realize that there were many things that I was fearful of. And so I made a deal with him. He's going to do something in relation to his own fear. And I promised I'd to have a session on my YouTube channel about fear and how I process that and what fear means to me. Because when I was talking to him, I was discussing my own fear, I guess, in terms of just doing this. So I have a fear of producing this sort of material because I become fearful as to what people are going to say, whether it's going to be relevant, whether it has any great value. You know, I only have 40 odd subscribers, which reminds me, if you wish to subscribe, please do so and ring the bell if you find anything that I have to say of interest to you or helpful in any particular way. It'd be great to have your support. Also, the reason why I thought I'd do this is not just because I made the deal with the client, but that was a motivating factor, I will admit, because I really wanted to confront my own fear. And the fears I have are simply about how will what I do be recognised? Does it really matter? I certainly don't do it for the money because there's no money in it at the moment and probably never will be. But it's about presenting ideas that I have and whether those ideas have any value. So I do a range of stuff. I talk about politics. I talk about some of the work that I do. I talk about anger. I talk about anxiety and stress and a whole host of areas, relationships, a whole lot of areas I've been working in for over the last 30 years. So I thought I'd have this conversation about fear because it does occupy some space in my life and I'm assuming that it might occupy some space in yours. And if so, some of the things I have to say might be helpful to you. Well, I'm hopeful that they might be helpful to you. So where does fear sit? I think fear sits in most of our lives. It tends to govern many of the decisions that we make about how we wish to conduct ourselves. One of a person's greatest fear often is about speaking in public, for example, and what that might mean in terms of being ridiculed, in terms of not saying anything that makes any sense, not being understood, and so on. Some of the fears that I hold about simply doing this with you today. I'm fearful that, firstly, am I going to reach anybody? I am going to send this to my clients, so at least there'll be one person who watches it. But, you know, do I have something of value to say? And I know that over 30 years of experience working as a social worker, that I have information, I have understandings that are not necessarily unique to me, but certainly have informed the way I choose to work and how I view people. So where does fear sit? Well, fear governs most of the things that most of us choose to do. We become, as the client told me today, we virtually become frozen by the fears that we have. They prohibit us from taking steps that perhaps would be helpful if we take. And we know the reasons why we choose not to make those steps. And the primary reason is that we don't know what the outcome's likely to be. So if I choose to do A, does it result in B? And if it does result in B, in our thinking, often that's a negative place to be. So what is it that we can do in order to confront the fear and find ways to move through it? I think one of the most important understandings we can have about fear is that, number one, it does freeze us. Number two, it prevents us from taking some steps that are really important. And number three is that we're always predicting we're always predicting what the end result will be, even though we don't know what it will be. For example, when I started to do this video today, I was wondering about what it is that I needed to say. Now, I don't know whether anything I'm saying at this point is making any sense to you at this moment, but I know that the ideas come to me, that they flow to me. But the inhibiting factor would have been, I haven't got enough to say, I don't know what to say, I'm going to look like an idiot. Now, some of you watching this may think, well, Tony, you are an idiot. But on the other hand, this is at least me doing something that which I generally, when I go to sit in front of a camera, put on my computer and all the software I've got, I often feel fearful about doing that for all the reasons that I've mentioned. But doing it's important. If we have a fear, then we need to understand what is it that prohibits us from confronting that fear, to understand the thought processes that we have that may restrict us from doing what it is that we think that we need to do. I think one of the greatest fears that I've often had is about confronting people in my life that have great meaning, my wife, my kids, and so on, and to confront them in a way about things which are emotional for me, about how I feel about things. Now, over the years, I've tended to overcome that, but initially it was a real problem for me because I was always concerned that they wouldn't understand, that they would judge me, that they wouldn't acknowledge how I was feeling, and as a result of that, I wouldn't be heard. So I decided that it was best to find ways to talk about my emotional state than it was to hide it. The discovery was that all of my fears were unfounded, that the reality was that as I started to speak more about how I felt about things, I found I wasn't judged. In fact, I found that there was a great deal of love and admiration for me because at least I had the courage to be able to talk about my fears, my emotional state in particular. Now, what happens when we are confronted by our fears and we find a way to move through them? We discover also that the things that were prohibiting us from making that move were probably unrealistic or they were erroneous, and that our experience becomes something different. When we stand up in front of a group of people, for example, and we talk to them and that we're concerned about how our message will come across, and sometimes we will have it written down, we've rehearsed it 1,000 times, and we deliver it, and then we're still concerned about how that will be read. When we discover, though, that what we said was important, that people acknowledged it, and that we received some positive accolades for what it is that we've done, we feel good about that experience. It then means that the next experience we have isn't as traumatic. However, as I was reminded today, sometimes we can have 100 positive comments about something that we've done, and we have 5 or 10 that are negative. And we want to focus just on the 5 or 10 that are negative. I can remember in one of my posts that I did on YouTube, I had someone come back and criticise one of the things that I had said. There weren't many comments anyway. Don't get many comments on my YouTube channel. But someone came out negative. And I just saw it as an opportunity to try and find a way to educate this person, not to attack them for what they said and for their attacks on me, but also to be able to have a conversation. It was an opportunity to do something different, to be able to express myself and hear what they had to say. So we tend to take the negatives of what is happening instead of looking at the overall positives. 10 negative comments versus 100 positive comments. The point is that we can always learn from those negative comments anyway. We can understand what it is that they're trying to tell us. We can either accept them and see some opportunities for our own personal change, or we can just see them as a spurious comment that is just having a go at you for whatever reason. So my message today is find a way to firstly understand what your fear is, and then to be able to confront it, to do it, no matter how traumatic it may be, and see how you feel at the end of that process. my son, I was speaking to him the other day, one of my sons, and he lives in Ireland. And he's coming back here for my other son's wedding, which is next month. And I said, look, when you come over, I'll make a deal with you. If you come over and visit us, because my son's getting married in New South Wales, I said, if you come over and visit us, I'll go skydiving with you. And because he does like extreme sports. And at the end of that conversation, I thought, well, that was a pretty giant leap, literally, and that I don't know how I felt necessarily about making that decision. But I know that I can transport myself to that event and think, well, is my parachute going to open? Do these people really know what they're talking about? Or can I just put myself in the position of actually completing the jump, and with a feeling that must be, not the process of jumping out of the plane, looking down at the earth and all the other frightful things that you can have, but what was the process like? What was it like if I finished the event? So the other way we can approach fears is to not look at all those negative possibilities, but have a look at the positive ones. Back to the speech thing. If you're giving a speech, for example, and that's a fear, then think about the positive stuff that may come from that, particularly what you're doing and how that's going to impact other people, the message that you plan to give and how you believe they should possibly, or how some people, not all, but how some people will receive that message. So the key to fear is to confront it and to just do it. No matter what that fear is, whether that's confronting a boss, whether that's being a whistleblower at work, whether that's confronting somebody who has been abusive to you, and to be able to meet that abuse in the best way possible without being abusive back. I had an experience not long ago where someone had attacked me in the most ferocious way. And part of my thought process was, do I accept what that person's saying about me, or do I find other ways to address the issue without making it about me? And one of the things I chose to do was simply not to engage with that person while they were feeling so angry towards me. And did I think it was justified? No, it wasn't. But do we sometimes take that on? There was a period of time where I thought that was a definition of someone's defining me in a certain way, which just was not true of me, I didn't believe. And so I had to look at some of the things that they were saying and think, well, I had to evaluate whether or not there'd been aspects of my behaviour that were unhelpful. I was able to identify one or two things that I certainly could have changed. I didn't accept the abuse for what it was, though, because it was designed to hurt, and I wasn't going to allow that person to have that opportunity to hurt me in that way. But those things do play, and I understand this, those things play on our mind. The negative connotations that comes out of confrontation often do play on our mind. Am I doing this correctly? Should I confront this person? Is this person a worthwhile person? Is this a person that has to be in my life? If it's a boss or somebody else that you work with, clearly they are. But then you can find ways to do the confronting differently. Now, one of the other issues that I think is really important is that if we're going to confront somebody, and we're used to kind of being a little bit more aggressive in our confrontation, and we know that being aggressive is just going to inflame whatever is happening, then perhaps we can look for other ways by which we can do the same thing, to confront them, but to be respectful, put your point of view. There's often a statement I make, which is the four-part statement, actually, which is part of assertion. And I learnt that if you make a statement to somebody and it's done appropriately and it's done without aggression and it's just talking about your feelings and how those feelings and how those the reason why you're feeling the way that you are, once you've done all of that and you've told a person how you want to be, and if they accept that, then that's fabulous. That's the way it should be. If they don't, it then tells you a lot about them and what that relationship that you have is like, or likely to be like, if they continue viewing you in a certain way. So what I'm saying to you all is, firstly, I've done this video. So I've fulfilled my obligation to my client, but I also hope that it has some benefit for you. And if you'd like to comment below about where your fears are, the sort of things that cause you to make decisions that are unhelpful, that prevent you from progressing with your life, about work, relationships, your own family, whatever that might be, then please let me know. Finally, I just want to say that the way we choose to face our fears is often based on the lessons that we've learned about confronting conflict and fears in the past from our parents and other people that have been in our lives. And sometimes the way we confront our fears is based on social media and how we see other people confronting theirs. So work out what it is that causes the blockage, what is it that causes your freeze, and then make choices about the appropriate behaviour to be able to confront those fears. Sometimes it isn't as easy as even saying, I'm going to throw myself out of an aeroplane, because some of the fears that we've got relate so much to the other people that sit around us and how we view their reaction to us. And sometimes we just need to take ourselves out of that bubble and see things completely differently, because they're often not the way that they appear to be to us, based specifically on our past experiences. So I hope that was helpful. Make a difference by confronting your fears and knowing that by confronting them, you'll find a pathway forward that's going to be helpful, beneficial to you, and also beneficial to those people around you. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. And more importantly, be safe.